adventures, everybody. I'm Melissa Banczak, and welcome to episode 73 of Books Cubed, the show where I chat with authors you should be reading. It is Thursday, August 13th, 2020, and we're going to jump right into this week's show. I don't have a lot to say after talking way too much last week, and this week I am so excited to bring you an interview with USA Today bestselling author Zara Keane. We're going to get right to it. Today I have got Zara Keane on the show, and I hope I said that right.
Yes.
Okay, good. Because I'm terrible with names. And I'm going to read her bio real quick, and it's on my phone, or it was on my phone. Nope, you know what? That's something else that was on my phone that I was going to talk to her about. So I'm going to read from her website here. USA Today bestselling author Zara Keane grew up in Dublin, Ireland, but spent her summers in a small town very similar to the fictional Ballybeck.
Yes.
Is that right? And Smuggler's Cove in the Movie Club Mystery Series, which is what we're going to be talking about today. She currently lives in Switzerland with her family, and when she's not writing, she loves knitting, running, unplugged gaming, and adding to her insanely large lipstick collection. It must be really hard with face masks and lipstick. I mean, that
yes.
was my
yes.
my niece is a Mary Kay consultant, and I just think all these great lipsticks she's got, and everybody's wearing masks. Oh man! So we're talking today about her movie club mystery series, and I love the description in the books. There's this theater that's a cafe that's been turned into a cafe, and I want to make sure I ask you more about that, if that is based on something that's real, because I think that's just fantastic. So the first book in the series is Dial P for Poison, and I'm going to read the description. My career in the San Francisco PD ended the day I arrested my husband. Maggie Doyle gives her cheating ex and crumbling career in the San Francisco PD the proverbial middle finger and moves to the Wild West of Ireland. Lured by her aunt's promise of a restful Irish vacation, Maggie agrees to help out at the movie theater cafe in exchange for bed and board. Things are looking up until the most hated woman on Whisper Island is poisoned at the cafe. With her aunt as the prime suspect, Maggie and her rock-hard muffins are hurled into the murder investigation with the help of her UFO enthusiast friend, a nun, and a feral puppy. Maggie's determined to clear her aunt's name. Can she catch the murderer before they strike again, or will her terrible baking skills burn down the cafe first? And this book is fun. It's so much fun, and I love that. Like I said a couple of minutes ago, I love that the Aunt's Cafe is inside a movie theater.
Yeah.
I mean, how did the idea for this series come about?
The town in which my grandparents lived when I was growing up had it used to have a movie theater there, or a cinema, film theater, as they would have called it. And at the time that I was a kid, it was boarded up, and you had like this sort of, the sign was sort of hanging to the side. And my cousin and I used to peek in the boards and sort of imagine what it would have looked like back in the day when it was an actual film theater, movie theater, and so on. And when I was coming up with the idea of the series, my mother is American, although her parents were Irish, so she was first generation American and then moved back to Ireland as an adult. So I had both the American connection and the Irish connection, and I thought, how cool would it be if this American moved to Ireland and she was working in a movie-themed cafe that her aunt had created by renovating an old movie theater like the one in my grandparents' town. And the fact that it's called the Movie Theater Cafe is because my main character's mother sent a very nice sign to the aunt when she was opening her cafe, and instead of it being like cinema, it was movie theater, and the aunt just rolled with it, and that's kind of how the whole thing started.
Yeah, because in Ireland it wouldn't be called movie; it would be
called film. Yeah, although that is changing more and more as people use more American terms. So movie, film, but yeah, generally speaking, and particularly in that generation, it would have been film. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got this cozy series. And there's 6 books, right?
There are 6 books at the moment, yes.
Are you planning on writing more?
I do.
Oh, good, 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 good. And so normally in cozies, and I write cozies too at the moment. Normally in cozies, in like the first chapter, and you hear this all the time, you have to have the murder in the first chapter or you're going to lose your audience. And I think I think it's like about the 20% mark
Yeah,
when the killer, I was trying to look and see, I think it was 20% mark.
it's
And I'm
pretty much
reading,
exactly that.
I completely forgot that it was a cozy because I got
Okay.
so into these crazy people that live in this little island off of Ireland. And I actually really like that better than the murder taking place first because I knew all the characters. So when the murder happens, I'm thinking, who is the killer? And so I've got ideas of my own who the killer would be as I'm reading along. And so, I mean, did you worry did you set out to make it that late in there? Did you do it on purpose to change it up?
Yes and no. That particular book started out as a contemporary romance. Believe it or not. Believe it or not. And I had this idea for the American moving to Ireland, working in her aunt's cafe, and she was going to find love. And I kept coming up with mystery ideas, more mystery ideas. Prior to that, I'd been a romance author. I'd written contemporary romance and romantic suspense. But I had always intended on writing a mystery one day. It was just a matter of finding the time, to be able to juggle both genres. And this story just really did not, like the original hero that I'd picked for it, he was just meh. I mean, we could just forget him. So at the start of NaNoWriMo in 2016, I scrapped the original idea completely. I just started from page 1 and I started writing the story that I wanted to tell. And I didn't initially set out to have the murder at the end of the first act. But as I was writing it, and I knew who was going to be the murder victim, I thought, she's so awful that I don't want to just kill her and not have her on the page. Because that's the problem when you have the murder right at the start. And one of the things about cozy mysteries that we all love, both in books and in cozy mystery TV series, is the fact that the victim is generally not somebody nice. It's somebody we kind of hate or love to hate. And if the murder happens too soon, then you kind of miss that, if that makes sense.
It totally does. You do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for book 1, I rolled with it and I figured, I have nothing to lose. This is my first cozy mystery. I have no experience of writing in this genre before. People will either enjoy it or they won't. And if it doesn't work out, then, I reinvent. I had already done that a number of times with my romance books. So I figured I had nothing to lose. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. So
Yeah. And you've got 649 ratings on Amazon with 4.5 stars for the average. So I think that people, and have you ever had anybody complain about the
never,
fact?
never. And it's so funny you bring this up because only the other day I was chatting to another cozy mystery author about when to place the murder because she was feeling pressure in her work in progress to get the murder in really fast. And she said, but it's really sad because my background story for this person, he's so awful. I really want him on the page. And I said, just put him on the page. I want to say as well, like I've written 6 books in this series. And in some of them, you get a murder much earlier, either first page, end of first chapter. I have had others where it happens later. In fact, in book 6 in the series, the murder victim is so brilliant that I absolutely had to keep her in the story for longer. And she didn't die until the halfway point. And nobody has complained. Not one person has complained. So I think that the advice to get a corpse in fast is it's not without merit. I think that it's important to have something exciting that hooks the readers. It can be a different inciting incident, like hook them into another mystery that your character is involved in. It can be like the murder victim. Like say, for example, you've got more than one murder victim in the story. Then yeah, you can start with a corpse and then work up to killing the interesting character later on. So I think there's plenty of ways that we can sort of play with this trope and really own it and make it our own.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. And my cozies, I'm on my third one. Um, there are no murders.
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't even realize they were cozies. I thought they were just mysteries.
Hmm.
Um, but it's the no cursing, no sex, no blood. It's not a small town. It's different town, different state in every book, different country. But yeah, and nobody so far has said, "Hey, wait a minute, there's no murders."
Yeah. My feeling is that for some of these nuances, authors care an awful lot more than readers do. Readers want a good story, and if you're delivering and they're not complaining, then you're doing your job right.
Certainly, you are. You are now. Talking about six murders, and Maggie comes to this little whisper. What's it's whisper
Whisper Island.
Whisper
Yeah,
Island. I started to
yeah.
say Cove, Whisper Island. So at one point, and when they're trying to figure out who the murderer is, and the police sergeant says, only tourists kill, no, none of the
Yes.
locals kill. And I'm thinking, six books, and if there's six murders and they all take place in Whisper Island, are the locals starting to think that Maggie's bad luck because nothing bad has happened to this island until she arrived?
Well, there is a running gag about her being a dead body magnet. And when I was originally planning the series, once I decided that this book one was not just going to be a standalone mystery, it was going to be part of a series. It was important to me to make sure that I didn't have, the so-called Cabot Cove syndrome, where, in Murder She Wrote, where there's this tiny town and there's so many corpses piling up. It's like murder capital of the US. It was important to me that that not be the case. So not every single murder has happened on the island. The island is in a little cluster of islands. So there are a couple of other islands where murders happen, and it's also quite close to the mainland. So a couple of the murders actually happened there as well. But it's connected to the Whisper Island crowd, and that's how I can sort of play with that.
Yeah, yeah, and then yeah, then it's yeah. I remember the murder she wrote, and it's like, yeah, I remember my dad saying, "I don't want to visit this town.
Yes.
It's absolutely scary." So, how long have you been? How long have you been writing? Because this isn't your only series.
No, it's not. Yeah. Um, well, if we scale it right back to the start, I started telling stories when I was a kid and playing with my Barbie dolls and stuff like that because I was an only child, and I used to create these elaborate, basically soap opera style plots for my Barbies, and I would get really excited. Like each weekend when I was home, I could play out these storylines, but I didn't actually write down any stories until I was in my teens. And at that stage, it was the usual teen angst stuff. It wasn't anything that you would consider genre or commercial fiction. That came later. And when I was in my early 20s, I moved to Germany for postgrad studies. And because I was writing papers in German and I was learning in German all day, I was speaking German all day, writing in English became a sort of a nice way to wind down before bed. So I would read romance novels, I would read mysteries in English, and I started writing my own. And when I was originally starting out writing, this would have been, let's say, 2003 or so, there wasn't a robust online presence for places for writers to go. And I looked and I looked, and I eventually found a couple of forums for romance writers. And they were and still are extremely giving in terms of nurturing newer writers, sort of paying it back and paying it forward depending on where they are in their careers. So I joined a couple of those. I joined RWA and one of their online chapters. And that was kind of how I got into the idea of writing a full length book. Now, I didn't manage it. I didn't manage it for many, many, many years. I was doing this as a hobby, and I was like the queen of the first three chapters. So I would have many books with the first three chapters polished, even entered contests and so on. And it wasn't until I had my second child that I decided I was taking a career break for a couple of years to raise the kids. And as I think many mothers they can identify with it, I started to go stir crazy. So I decided, well, okay, my baby's teething and my toddler is throwing tantrums. So what better time than to sit down and do NaNoWriMo in November 2009? And I did. I set my clock. I got up early each morning. And by the end of NaNoWriMo, I had 60,000 words of a truly terrible book, but it had a beginning and a middle and an end. And that was the time when it really clicked. Oh, I can do this. I can actually write a full book. It might not be a good book, but it's a book. And from that point on, I started to get a lot more serious. I submitted material and I got a stacked ton of rejections. Then I slowly started to get requests for full manuscripts. And then I went to the Romance Writers of America conference in 2011. And Maya Banks and Courtney Milan had a sort of unofficial workshop on indie publishing, because at the time it was very much hush, hush, hush. But in 2011, it was just on the cusp of people embracing it. So it was popular enough and people were interested enough that their conference or their workshop in the lobby was packed, like packed. There were more people at that workshop than there were in some of the official ones. And at that point, then I started to think, oh, maybe that's an idea. So I went away from the conference. I ended up having another baby shortly after. So that sort of delayed my progress slightly. But by 2014, I had 3 books in the same series written and ready to go. And I published them. And that's how I started.
What series is that?
That was the Ballybeg series. That's my very first series. It's a contemporary romance / romantic comedy. And as the name implies, it's set in Ireland, in a small town. And yeah, that was a lot of fun to write.
How many are in that series?
5.
Oh, good. So
Yeah.
then somebody, and I think you have them on Kindle Unlimited, the books?
They're not on Kindle Unlimited, but they are in Amazon, or they are available in Kindle editions. They're wide though. Yeah.
They're wide. Okay. Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you've got, so around, you were there around the beginning then.
Fairly shortly after. I press published in 2014. And at the time I was starting out, I thought, oh my God, I'm coming so late to this. Like everybody else has had such a head start. And now, several years later, people are still coming in and, it has not peaked. And yeah.
No, it isn't. It's something I forget what the numbers are for the amount of books that are published to Amazon every day.
It's
a
enormous.
huge number of them. Huge number. And I always remind my listening audience that are authors, this is why you have to have a professional cover, a professional edit, and it has to be written well. Just don't write your book in NaNoWriMo and slap a homemade cover on it and put it on, because the days of being able to do that and make a lot of money are long gone. That happened right when the Kindle came out.
Yeah.
Through about 2014.
Probably,
that's about the time that's about the time that you had to start, that all these people started publishing more. And that, and people say, oh, the print books it's print and you shouldn't go with Kindle. And no, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to read. There's all kinds of ways to listen. There's audiobooks. I can put a book on my computer and have my computer read it to me.
Exactly.
I mean, there's so many, there's so many ways to enjoy books that, I don't like it when anybody disparages any of the versions, of it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I like paper books, but I also like my Kindle at night, because my husband turns the light off and I want to be able to use have that Kindle where, it doesn't have a bright light or anything. And then I wake up in the morning and I've got the Kindle still with me, Oops. Oh, well, but it's just a wonderful thing. I love the Kindle.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So do you have a large American audience? Because your books are written in Ireland.
Yes. I would say that my largest audience is still American. Yeah. It's steadily grown though. Other markets have steadily grown. I've seen, for example, a big jump in Australia and New Zealand. And I say this for the vendors where I can actually see that, because you can't see that information for each vendor where you sell your books. But yeah, that is definitely noticeable.
And I saw in Dial P for Poison in the very beginning, you have a list of terms that people who are not from Ireland may not be familiar with. And I didn't read it because I thought, I want to see if any of them really throw me for a loop.
Yeah.
If I can't figure it out. And there was nothing that I saw that I couldn't figure out from the context. But do you get any, does anybody ever complain that they they can't follow?
Never. No. It's funny because my decision to use American spelling conventions stems back from starting my career back in 2014, because at the time the advice given to anybody who wrote in anything other than American spelling was make sure you publish your book with American spelling conventions, because otherwise you will get dinged by reviews. And that happened to friends of mine, so that sort of scared me. But it's something I've always had slightly mixed feelings about. And ideally I would like to have 2 versions, but at least the last time I checked, it was either not possible on most vendors or exceedingly difficult to do, where you'd have an American edition and a other edition.
Because I looked at that too. And it was and that's a shame too, because there are so many other countries and so many other languages. And to make everything be American English. And it's my husband was military, so every time he was overseas, it was always oh God, how did they say it? Do you speak American English or UK English? I think was how they would put it all the time. Yeah, and to really the real distinction. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. And the people reviewing it will say, "Oh, you spelled it wrong."
Yeah,
you spelled all the words wrong. It's like, well, look at who the author is and look where they live, before you go being all pissy. And speaking of reviews, and I know the big thing is when authors are always told, never read your reviews. And I accidentally was on Goodreads because I realized that they had the wrong covers and they won't change them. They have the original covers and the covers have all been updated. They're all gorgeous and they won't change them. So I've kind of written off Goodreads. But I accidentally saw some reviews and I'm like, wow, I have a ton of reviews. And of course, all of them are great except for 1 or 2.
Yeah. And which ones are you concentrating on? Those 1 or 2,
Those 1 or 2. Yeah. But I was proud of myself, though, because I did have a review. We were talking about it in the show last week where the girl, my lead character, her arch nemesis is this guy, and they haven't spoken in 10 years. And the reason why they hadn't spoken is explained in the first book. And I had a person write a review of it. It was just so lame. And I just laughed and thought, oh, that's perfect. And I used that in the next book. Okay, where perfect. She explains it to someone and they said, that's just so lame. And she's like, wait a minute, it's not lame. This is my life. And it made me angry. And so I thought that was fun. So, but I try not to read reviews. Are you a writer that looks at your reviews or do you try to stay away from them?
I read my reviews, but huge caveat. I pick my moments and I do it with a goal. For example, if I'm going in looking at reviews for a specific book, I'm doing it with my marketing hat on and my publisher hat on, not as an author. I understand sometimes it's very difficult to really make that distinction and separate the two halves, but I think it's important. And where reviews can be handy is looking for things that people say about your work and also looking for things that they're not saying, that they should be saying for your genre. I found it particularly useful when I jumped from romance into mystery because I had always had the feeling that there was something missing with my romance series. And I was fully aware of the fact that my favorite romance books were older romance, where you'd have like a huge big build-up and you'd have one sex scene. And those were the kind of books that I loved to read. And those were the kind of books that I loved to write. And I came into it right when erotic romance was becoming a huge big deal. And also spilling over into contemporary romance, where the expectations for hotter, more frequent sex scenes was most definitely there. So when I was looking at my reviews, even the good ones, nobody was saying, oh, sizzling sexual tension, brilliant sex scenes. They were focusing on the humor. They were focusing on the mystery plots that kept sneaking into the books. So from that point of view, I was actually able to glean an awful lot of information from reading my reviews. I also continue to read my reviews for my mysteries now. Again, generally speaking, picking my moment, not when it's just been published, because that's a really bad time. You're very emotional and feel extremely attached to the book.
Yeah.
A little bit of distance is good. But again, it's very good for me to see how are people responding to subsequent books in the series. Are they saying, oh, the earlier ones were better? I mean, of course, somebody always says that. But then you'll have other people saying, hey, this is the best one yet. So it's kind of looking where the balance are. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that those reviews of your romances help to make you decide that you wanted to write mystery?
Yes. Yes. Because it showed me where I kind of knew where my writing strengths lay anyway, but it was sort of a proof for me. Like it was underlying the issue that where I needed to concentrate was the humor, the comedic aspect, the developing the characters, friends, and family, and the mystery elements versus trying to force myself into writing more sex scenes that I wasn't interested in. I have absolutely no problem with people having a ton of sex scenes in their books. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. I think it's awesome. And I have huge respect for people who can write several and make them really compelling and interesting. But frankly, it's not a talent I have. And I have to just own that and see, okay, well, if I'm not great at this, I am great at this. So I'm going to lean into it. And I love reading cozy mysteries. So it was no hardship for me to move into writing them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the sex scene thing. That my mom, my mother has dementia, so
Okay.
every time I see her, she knows I'm a writer. She remembers that,
Yeah.
and she's always asking me, "Why isn't there love in your books?" So we have the same conversation over and over and over again, and I always tell her because they're fast paced and there's no time.
Yeah.
Nobody has time to stop and have sex. They're too busy being chased or they're too busy trying to solve something. There's just no time. And
Yeah.
then the same conversation every time I see her, every
Yeah.
single time. So
Cozies do have romance, but it's a slow burn thing, like something that develops over the course of the books and it's closed door. So it's
yeah,
much more of a focus on the emotional aspect.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you've got the it's 6 books, right? And
6 books,
it's six
yes.
books for the movie club mystery. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say it wrong. I'm going to say it wrong. Um, are you planning on publishing more? How many books do you publish a year?
Very good question. I started out publishing a lot more, and now I've moved down to one or two because that for me is sustainable. So ideally, I'd like to be able to publish 3 a year, but we'll see. At the moment, I'm working on a 2 a year schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you write too much, it's absolutely exhausting, and it can just get you where you don't want to sit down at the computer.
Yeah. Well, I had a 3 year period where I wrote a lot. Like I wrote 4 or 5 books a year, and in 2017 I wrote 6, and I burned out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was totally predictable, utterly preventable, and I just ignored all of the warning signs and I burned out. And then I ended up not writing anything for a year, like nothing.
Wow.
And I had then a 2 year gap. It was actually, no, was it even longer? It might have been 2.5 years between published books. Um, but I did get back into the rhythm of writing and at a much more sane and sustainable pace.
Yeah, it's and I know they say you need to write every day, and I don't.
Nope,
For me,
neither do
because
I.
it's and I did for a while. My last book, I was behind schedule, and I joined a Zoom group that I'm still part of. Every
Mm-hmm.
day we write from 1 till 6 Eastern time,
Yeah.
and in the morning I do marketing, and so every day for that first like 9 days, I wrote like actually 10 hours a day to finish up and to get my book
Okay.
into
Yeah.
the editor on time. Um, and then I was still doing that for a while, and then it just really just burned me out. So last week I had like or earlier in this week, I forget what day it is even, earlier in this week, we had like 3 days. My husband and I just laid on the couch and watched TV and played puzzle word games and, got takeout and did nothing. And it was absolutely wonderful. So do you find yourself that you need to, do you have yourself on a set schedule, or do you find that you just work until you have burnout and then take a couple of days off?
I have to work on a schedule, and my schedule is more or less around my kids' schedules at the moment.
That's right.
Because they're still young and they're still in school. But what I try to do is I work into my schedule enough thinking time, as in active thinking time, because I'm not somebody who can just sit down and write a book. I love people who can do it. It does not work for me. I need to have a very clear idea of what's happening in this scene or this chapter before I actually put my fingers on the keyboard. That is something that I've just learned as part of my process. I also do quite a bit of research. The series that I have 2 cozy mystery series, and the second one is a time travel series. So I have the character going back in time. Basically, for book 1 is set in 2019, and the premise is that a time traveler from 1919 ends up accidentally in her time period, and then in the second book she ends up going back to his time period. So I had to do quite a bit of research around that, and that was a lot of fun, particularly because it's a very interesting period of Irish history, because it's right around the time of the War of Independence. So there's a lot happening. It's just at the end of the First World War, start of the Irish War for Independence, and there's a lot of material that I can use for that.
And is that series out yet?
It is, yeah. The first one is out. The first one is called Deadline with Death, and that is book 1 in the Time Slip Mysteries, and book 2 will be out in October. I say, hopefully. I'm currently finishing it. But that is
yeah. Oh, there it is. Deadline with Death. Okay.
Yeah.
And it is a cozy also.
It's also a cozy. It's a cozy historical contemporary mashup, really. Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
So that was a lot of fun, but those books most definitely take more research than the movie club mysteries do. So I have been allotting time for that, trying to slot in thinking time, and also obviously the words on the page business, which is tracking word count for me is the most important part during the first draft process. And once I get on to revisions, I don't care about the number of words on the page. It's more like editing this scene or editing this chapter and making sure that that is tight.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that you're an outliner. It's I'm just very much, you need to outline. I used to be a literary agent, and I could tell you the books and screenplays that came to me that were not outlined. I could tell just by reading them. Nope, this was not outlined. It was not, and it's just so important. And I think it's Rachel Aaron, Aaron, I think that has the book 2000 to 10K. And she also, and I love that she pushes the outline. If you know what you're going to write before you sit down to write, you will be able to just cruise on through it.
Yeah.
Easily. Yeah. And that's part of my problem too, is with these. I don't outline enough. I have, my office is full of whiteboards. I probably have like 10 whiteboards all over my office. My desk is a three desk corner, and the whiteboards are all leaning against the walls, and I carry them around, and they're all full of the notes and things. But I tend to be a little impatient with these cozies, and I have kind of jumped in without having, a real set middle. Beginning and the end very outlined. The middle, it's not so much. Yeah. So that's been my problem, and I'm huge outline. And even people who, even I used to teach an outline class, and like we're the worst. You tell people to, like a doctor, do this, and don't look at me, but do this instead. Which is bad. We should follow our own advice that we give to others. So in my series, I hate to give it away, I've got an Easter egg in my series, and anybody who's a film goer knows Easter eggs are, I hope I'm saying this right, They're little hidden messages, little secrets inside the film that are kind of a wink between the filmmaker and the audience, and not everybody gets them. And if I see a list, 20 Easter eggs from such and such movie, I'll always bookmark it and go watch the movie and come back. I don't want to look at it ahead of time because it's going to spoil the movie for me. But in my series, in my June Nash series, I've got an Easter egg in the series that like nobody's found, and I've been really surprised. And I'm not going to say what it is, but it's like I thought it was really simple. It was kind of fun, something that we did, and I've had no readers comment about it.
Okay.
It's like, okay, fine, whatever. So do you have anything in your books that you've done like that, and did it work better for you?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I put an Easter egg in like you have described, but I have done things like used something that happened in my real life, and friends or family will instantly say, oh, I know who that character really is. I know who you used to base that character on. I'll quickly say we have that lovely copyright disclaimer that, everything is fictional. It's not based on real life events or people, etc., to protect us. But I mean, of course, when you're writing, ideas come to you, and oftentimes funny things or memorable things that happen to you or the people that you know are a great jumping off point. And by the time I've written the story, they don't bear an awful lot of resemblance to the actual event or the person, but they're definitely in there. I mean, I can think of one example is in book 3 of the Movie Club Mysteries. I have a very obnoxious American billionaire, and I was not thinking of any American politician when I wrote that book. I swear, everybody thought it was based on a specific person. It wasn't. I had gone to so much trouble to disguise that guy's identity. I made him a different nationality, etc. It was based on somebody I know in real life. But yeah, of course, everybody jumped to a different conclusion. So that was actually pretty amusing.
Oh, that's funny. Has the person figured it out?
No, the person is now deceased, but it was very, my family members figured it out pretty quickly, yes.
Yeah, that's yeah. As writers, we pull stuff from real life, and my husband's always saying to me, "If you didn't know me, you'd have nothing to write about."
Yeah,
because my series came about. We were talking about this last week on the show. My June Nash Mysteries came about because of me taking care of his 100+ snakes for a year while he was with NATO in Izmir, Turkey. Yeah, so
100+ snakes.
The
That's
100,
brilliant.
yeah. So there were like 40 adults and like 60 babies, because he would breed snakes and we would take them to shows and sell them.
Yeah.
And he's gone for a year, and and I cared for these snakes and thought about ways to kill him for a year. So
that's brilliant.
I think it's people, they know that if they know a writer, that things that happen are going to end up. And my niece said to me not too long ago, "You should write about some of the members of the family, put them in your books." And I said, "How do you know I haven't already, sweetie?"
Brilliant.
Yeah. So as you're in Switzerland?
I am, yeah.
Now for your new series that you're doing that goes back in time, have you gone out to do research, to travel to those spots?
Yeah. Well, I studied history in university. That was my major. So I already knew quite a bit about the period to start with, but certainly the last 2 times I was back in Ireland, I went to archives and I made sure that I did research, and I visited places and made sure that I had a very good visual of where these places were, because I'm a very visual writer. I have great respect for people who can just make up a place in their head. For me, my fictional towns are all based on places I've been. Sometimes they're an amalgamation of several places, but they are based on places that I've lived or been, because it's a great way for me to really get a picture of them in my head. So yeah, I'm very much a fan of research, and I like getting little details that people might not otherwise know that are interesting and funny, because you don't want to slow down the pace of the book with a lot of boring historical information, which I personally find fascinating, but I can guarantee you that 99% of my readers will not.
Yeah,
I think
and
that
you
is
know,
an art form.
you have to be accurate too, because you'll
Yeah.
get that one person that was that knows, that did a paper on it, or knows about it, and they will leave that review of that. Then nothing is historically accurate, and they'll go, you know,
Yes.
they'll be the far extreme. Yeah, so that's, I mean, that's fun to be able to go and do that traveling. For one of my books, I want my character, she jokes about being, she drinks, so she jokes about, and when she drinks, she gets friendly, not in the I'll show you mine if you show me yours kind of way. I think that's how I said it. But in the hanging out with people she doesn't normally like her mother.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
she's afraid she's going to wake up on a month-long European riverboat cruise because she's been drinking and invited her mother on one. And I said to my husband, "Oh my God, we have to do that.
Yeah.
We have to.
Yeah.
I have to," because we were joking about the next 3 books in the series, where they're going to take place, and I had book 5 and 6 figured out, 4 and 5 figured out, but not 6. And he's all, "You have to do that." He said, "And we have to do it in real life."
Yeah.
And so I thought that will just be the best money ever spent
Mm-hmm.
researching a book,
Yeah.
ever. So I mean, do you have any ideas, any things like that that would just be? I mean, that's going to be costly, but something that in mind that you would absolutely spend money on if it was sort of toward one of your books.
Yeah, I'm also a huge travel fan. I love traveling places, and our last family holiday was specifically picked, that the location was specifically picked because I want to set a book there. My husband knew this. He was like, "That's fine. It's okay." Um, yeah, so that for me is most definitely a good investment, sort of mixing travel for pleasure and travel for research. In terms of where I think that it's important to spend my money in my business, I started out, when I started publishing in 2014, having a developmental edit done on your book was unusual. Not everybody did that. I did it. I've always done it. I benefit hugely from investing in developmental edits / content edits. For me as a writer, it's helped me to grow, getting feedback, working on my story structure, working on my characterization, my plot arcs. So for me personally, that is an excellent investment in my career. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely, yeah. So so you've got the next book. What is the next book coming out?
The next
That
book
is
is
coming
going
out.
to be out in October, and it's called Fatal Front Page, and it's a time slip mystery.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So tell people really quickly again what your series are and where they can find you.
If we're focusing on the Cozy Mystery series, it's
Oh,
the
all of
Movie
them.
Club Mysteries, all of
Throw
them.
them all in
Okay.
there. Yeah,
Okay,
because
perfect.
yeah.
Then I have a contemporary romance series / romantic comedy series called the Ballybeg series, and that has 5 books. I have a romantic suspense series also set in Ballybeg called the Ballybeg Bad Boys. That is 5 novellas. And I also have 2 books in a romantic suspense series set in Dublin called the Triskelion Team, or the Dublin Mafia. And then for the Cozies, I have the Movie Club Mysteries. That series has 6 full-length books and 1 novella. And the Time Slip Mysteries currently has 1 book out, and we'll have a second one out in October.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
And you have a website.
I do. It's zarakeane.com. And I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, and I'm on Instagram as well.
Fantastic. And I'll have the links in the show notes for everybody so they can find you. And I think if they join your mailing list, they get free story.
Yes, they do. They get a free Movie Club mystery novella, and if they all and depending what a couple of emails later, they also get the option to have a free romance too. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so I'll have those down in the show notes, and everybody drop
Perfect.
down there. Yeah, take a look, click on that link, and that it's it was great to talk to you. And
Well, thank you so much.
yeah, thank you for coming on. And I'm sure I'll have you back on again when you have the next series, because the time travel one I'm going to take a look at next.
Okay.
Because I love time travel. I love fish out of water stories.
Yes, so do I. So do I.
Yeah, and that is just my favorite thing. And so I would love to look at that one. And is that one that you plan on? If you have the first one out, but you have the next one coming out, you said in
Exactly.
October.
Yes.
And that how you plan on write 5 or 6 books for that one?
Exactly. Yeah. I have rough ideas for, I have clear ideas for the first 4, and I have rough ideas for 5 and 6.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. Bye.
There were a couple things that I didn't get a chance to talk to her about. And one of them was to mention that in the back of Dial P for Poison, there is the recipe for the drink that they're all drinking when everything goes downhill. And it's called let me look, peppermint cream cocktail. And the ingredients are in there. Sounds delicious. I cannot wait to try it. I need to add the ingredients to my grocery list. If it was normal times, I'd go hit a bar and hand the bartender the little list and say, make me this. But who knows when the world will be ready for us to all go back out into it. We'll see. So let me see, what was the other one? Oh, okay. So the other one was her other series, Deadline with Death, a time slip mysteries book. If you like fish out of water, like me, time travel is like one of my favorite genres to read. And she does this series, and it's also cozy. But let me read this first line because this will get you hooked. The first line is, the morning the clown croaked at my feet began with a cockfight and ended with a corpse. That's a great line. I absolutely love it. So that will be one of the next ones that I read when I finish what I'm currently working on. And, I always need new books. So if you have any recommendations, you can drop down to the show notes and click on that comment link. You can comment. It'll take you over to our YouTube channel. You can comment there. Or if you're on YouTube already, you know what to do. And that's it for this time. I'll see you next week. Oh, wait a minute. We're also on Instagram. I always forget to mention that. Instagram books, I think it's _cubes or books cubed. I know the name of the show. So you can check us out there and leave any recommendations or comment on the show in general. And that's it. I will see you next time. Go read a good book.